Does manual mode still make sense in 2022? Well, hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Emmett and today I want to propose the question, does manual mode still make sense in 2022? So in this video, I wanted to talk about camera modes and specifically explore the idea of whether you need to be using your camera's manual mode to get the full potential out of your camera. Now, I don't think that there is a right or wrong answer to this question, and I don't want to start a fight about it in the comments. If you are a manual purist, that's totally fine, or if you always use auto mode, that's totally fine too. I think that you really should do whatever works for you. But what I want to talk about is whether you really need to use manual mode. So it wasn't all that long ago that I was taking all of my photos with this. This is the Nikon D3100. It was released in 2010, and to get the most out of this camera, you absolutely need to use it in manual mode. It's really not that bad of a camera even today, and especially for the price, but it's fairly bad actually at picking the right exposure. Now though, I'm using the much more high-tech Nikon Z6 II, which I'm filming on right now. And with this camera, I'm not really sure that you actually need to use manual mode. I wouldn't say that you should necessarily shoot in the auto mode all of the time because auto really doesn't give you any creative control. But I think it is time to take another look at the aperture and the shutter priority modes. Now, in 2022, cameras are much better at picking the right exposure than they used to be. This D3100 that I have here honestly is usually wrong. But the Z6 II is almost always right. Plus there are features built into the camera to fine-tune the metering, which is used to select the exposure and to actually expose when the camera is doing it for you. The Z6 II has 4 metering modes. It has matrix, center weighted, spot, and highlight metering. And you can see the result of each of those modes live on the screen the moment that you select them actually, because it's a mirrorless camera. And beyond that, you can use the exposure compensation to adjust the exposure up or down a little bit. And again, you can see that on the screen as you do it. Now, if you always needed to change the exposure compensation for every shot, then that would probably get pretty annoying, and you might as well just use the manual mode. And that's kind of how it was on older cameras that weren't able to pick the right exposure as well. But on the Z6 II, other newer cameras, you really don't need to change it that often, and once you do get it where you want it for the photo shoot, the camera will automatically adjust to changes in lighting, unlike when you are shooting in manual mode where you have to adjust to changes yourself. Now, to avoid grain in your photos, you are probably going to want to set a max ISO if your camera allows you to do that, or else you might want to set the ISO manually, but again, that's pretty easy to do. Now, what about the creative control? Suppose you want to blur motion or freeze it in time, you want to have a soft background or a sharp background. Well, in terms of the exposure, the aperture and the shutter speed affect each other, remember. So if you want to use a wide aperture for a photo to get a soft background, you'll either have to go to a higher shutter speed, or you're going to find that your photo is overexposed, or you can put a filter on the front of the camera. But the aperture and the shutter priority modes at this point start to make sense, because rather than having to adjust the other setting yourself, you can just let the camera automatically do it, setting the one that you most care about for this photo and letting the camera pick the other one. So in that case, is it time to ditch manual mode for good? Well, I'm not quite convinced of that. I think it still has its uses. There are some times when, for artistic reasons or for other reasons, you want something that isn't really what the camera might consider to be an optimal exposure, and maybe isn't even within the 3 stops offered by the exposure compensation. Manual mode is much better for video as well, when you don't want changing lighting in your environment to affect the appearance of the shot. So if I were to say walk under a tree, I want it to appear as if I'm now in shadow and not as if the sky has gotten brighter, right? Manual mode is also great for learning photography, and sometimes it's also just really fun to use. I think of it kind of like if you're making a chili from scratch versus if you're buying it from a can. Both of them might taste really good, but when you make the chili from scratch, you get that whole experience of cooking, and you learn skills from that you just don't when you make the canned version. So if you have the time in a photo shoot and you want to manually expose the scene, then I would say absolutely go for it. In fact, that's what I do a lot of times when I'm on slower landscape photography shoots. But when you're in a rush, if the light is changing, etc., I think it's really safe at this point just to let the camera do the work for you. In the end, like I said up front, I don't think that there's a right answer for this. Manual mode can be a great tool for learning, a great experience, and it works better for some people. With modern cameras though, the other modes just perform really well, especially if you learn how to really tweak them, and they can free you up to focus on other things besides the camera settings. I don't think that there is a wrong way to make art. If something is working for you, keep doing it. So that is all for this video, guys, and if you did like it, don't forget to hit the like button on your way out and to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss more things that I am very excited to share with you in the future. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.